get to comic layouts now because I have a lot to say about like comic layouts and how to make them readable. This is just a sidebar because I wanted to make a YouTube short about this anyway. But yeah, we can go back to, I'll go back to commission talk after this. Okay, so most important thing about comic layouts to me, make it readable. And what this means is that I don't want to have to search for how to read the comic. Like if you need like arrows pointing to like what each comic panel is, and it looks like this is a bad comic layout, I'm not going to read this. So here's my number one tip for making comics readable. Okay, now I want you to look at this comic and tell me what you think is wrong with it. It's boring, I don't know, man. Yeah, it's boring, and also all of these connect. At least when I make a comic, I do not want these two to connect because it gets confusing. For example, if you did this, how am I supposed to read this one? There we go. This is what I meant to do. How am I supposed to read this one? Oh, especially if you do it like this. Because initially, if you start reading from the left, you're going, but hark, this is in the way. And imagine you want this to be number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a bad layout if you want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like this. My biggest tip for writing comics or manga or like laying out stuff like that, is reading other people's things. Reading other people's mangas and comics. So here's the thing. How I would personally read this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me explain why. Having this be like this, having this have its own little like thing, tells me that there's a wall right here. Does that make sense? Like I've never figured out how to explain this properly, but like if you have a comic style like this, comic layout like this, there's a wall right here because there's an entire gap right here, and it goes through the entire thing. So it tells me that I'm supposed to read top down. Wait, I'm supposed to be reading like this. Bookbinding? Yeah, exactly. So the vertical alleys don't connect. Exactly. So if you want your comic to be more readable, I always want to read top down. Exactly. If you want your comic to be more readable, because you want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got to do something like this. Make a horizontal wall with your comic panel. And then bam, it's so much easier to read. I understand your point better with this example. That's good to know. I will use this example for the YouTube short. This is much easier to read than this. If you want it to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like my advice for starting comics is like you have to start simple. If you want to do like crazy layouts eventually, you have to start simple unless you actually like have like years of experience doing comics, because I can barely do like super complex, like super like cool, interesting comic layouts. I still do shit like this, and sometimes I'll have like a bam, just to like really have something here for interest. But like that's all I do because I'm not used to writing like page comics like this. I'm used to writing webtoons, and webtoons go like down all the way usually. But yeah, this is my example of a good comic page. Unless you're studying and are studying while going along. Exactly. And like it's okay if you make comics like this. We all like start somewhere. So like I'm not trying to shame anyone who like has made comics before that are hard to read. For most people, what is easiest is indeed making your horizontal walls noticeable so that people know, okay, this is a wall, I'm reading this way, and then I'm reading this way, and then I'm reading this way. Or if you're a manga artist, I'm reading this way, I'm reading this way, I'm reading this way. Speech bubbles play a big role in where your eyes go naturally too. This is true. If you want to do speech bubbles, you can have a panel like a 4-panel comic, but if your speech bubbles go like this, and you're expecting them to read this way, they're not going to read this way. They're going to read this way because that's the way the speech bubble goes. And so the speech bubble's talking. If you switch 3 and 5 box locations, I think it'd be a lot more readable, even with the wall. Kind of. Hold on. Let me do an example of this. Now we've encountered the opposite problem, though. Your eyes go to the heavier shot first. Yes, but the way I would read this now is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like a C. This is my issue with this one. But like ultimately, usually you want this one to be your final panel because it's at the bottom right. So if you want someone to read like this, you're gonna confuse the hell out of them. But if that's your point, now it's like a curve, yeah. If that's your point and you want it to be like a curve panel, you have to communicate that somehow. So with the wall here, if you want this to be your number 3, I'm not gonna read it like that because there's a wall here. I would do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because the wall will always dictate how you read the comics. And if you have walls like this, then it's going to take me a few seconds to decide, okay, how am I going to read this comic? How is this read? Readability is like the biggest goal in comics because if I'm too confused for too long, I'm clocking out. Exactly, I was just about to say. Like, if I have to figure out for too long, like, okay, which panel, no matter how nice the art is, yeah. If I have to decide for too long, like, okay, how am I reading this? Is this top down, left to right to left? Okay, here's the thing. You don't want your reader to do any more work than they have to read your comic. Because the moment you make them have to do any work, is when they clock out, like Painstar said. This is when they want to stop reading the comic because they're like, I don't know how to read this. Worst comic layout wins death battle. True. If I have to spend too long thinking, okay, I'm just gonna read this from left to right, and then suddenly I think it might be top bottom, and I get confused, I'm just gonna stop reading the comic. Especially if it's an ongoing comic. If this is like a short comic, like a one shot, and it's just like a comic strip, I might like spend some more time like trying to understand it because it's a comic strip and I don't have to like do that for the entire thing. But if this is a serialized comic, no one's gonna read it. Even no matter how good the art is, no matter how good your character writing is, if it's unreadable in terms of comic layout, no one's gonna read it. I'm not even good at comic layouts, I'm just saying this from reading manga myself. Yeah. And I feel like if you read manga and comics, like you understand this more than anyone. Because you're the consumer. You understand more than anyone. And I'm not saying that the viewer is always right, or that the reader is always right. But what I am saying is that sometimes you need to take reader interest into consideration when making a comic. And you have to learn what they will read and what they won't read. And no one's reading this. People are reading this because it makes sense. There's walls. Now, a bad comic layout would be doing this. If your comic layout looks like this, you need to go to hell. I'm just kidding. But like, it all depends. A good comic layout would be this. You need to use your bookbinding walls, and you need to know why you're putting them where, so that you can actually make a readable comic. That's my biggest advice. This is coming from someone who had an ongoing comic for like 3 years. I'll finish this example too. So speech bubbles also contribute to how you read a comic. So for example, if you have a speech bubble going like this, and it's like bleeding into the top panel and then going down into the bottom panel, your viewer's gonna read top down. And if you have it something like this is too confusing, no one's gonna read this. Because now you have a conflict of interest between which way do I read. This is why it's very smart to do things like have your things be in like one panel, your speech bubbles. But I have a comic where I don't put my panels in just one speech bubble. I overlay them sometimes. And so if I want them to read left to right, I have them go like this, and so that guides your eye into reading the next panel, and then maybe this is the close-up shot, and then you will automatically be moved down this way because there's nothing else to read on this side. So even with this panel layout where it has 2 walls and it's like perfectly even, so like it doesn't really guide your eye in terms of panel spacing, the speech bubble does the work for you. And also it tells you that this speaking is going over the panels. So you're like panning into this character as this character is still speaking. That's another reason I like to do overlapping panels sometimes, or speech bubbles sometimes. Also makes it seem more animated. Yes, exactly. Because when I first started getting into comics, I was more experienced with animation. So I was like, okay, I'll just make this like a storyboard. And this works. This can work. As you can see, it's working right now. You just have to do it intentionally. And I'm not even going to say that I did this perfectly every single time, because I didn't. Because I was a beginner at first too. So the way I did this overlapping panel didn't always work. But as I've gotten experience with drawing and making comics in my lifetime, I've been making comics since 2018. I don't even know how old I was, like 13. I feel like I at this point I know what makes a good comic, like a readable comic or not. So I want this video / short / whatever you're watching this on / live stream to help you make your comics worth reading because I want everyone to succeed in making comics, because I love comics. I love comics as a medium. This has been your motivational post.
I forgot to record an outro for the Picard Toad comic layout video. This is the outro. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Hopefully this video taught you something. I think I did a pretty alright job with it. But thank you for watching. I will be uploading my Study-cember VODs as edited videos throughout the month of December and probably into January as well. So look out for that. Lots of content coming in soon. But if you would like to see them early, just watch the streams or the VODs. But yeah, that's it. Just subscribe. You know the drill.